All right. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Yours Truly Baphomet podcast, reading Dr. Timothy Leary. We are now on to the 14th trip. This is the third last one. Surprised how quickly I've gone through it, but I am doing it every day. So the last one was where Timothy Leary, he was sort of engaging in DMT, where he was injected intramuscularly with it. And I think he learned a few more things about life and that kind of thing that you would usually do. So like he sort of saw reality come apart a bit more and other people and other things. And he found it difficult to focus when he was constantly asked where he was and all that other kind of thing. So that is what is up, people. All right, so we are now on to number 14. As you can see, when will you be ready to admit you are a divine messenger? Okay, guide. Sakti, divine nun. Keeping still, mountain, clinging, fire. All right, so we have the I Ching here. First, at the foot of the mountain, the image of grace. Thus does the superior man proceed when clearing up current affairs, but he dare not decide controversial issues in this way. Don't know. I guess we're going to find out what he means by that. At the time I ate the sacred mushrooms of Mexico, I called myself as follows: an atheist, a rationalist, skeptical of any sort of authority, ritual, tradition, faith, or magic, an empiricist, intolerant of scholastic speculation and Talmudic judging. An arrogant disdainer of fear-directed bourgeois conformity. Yeah, this is what happens, people, when you... That is such a powerful line to open up with from the get-go, honestly. Where's my... Just need to get the pen, people. Yeah, like, the fact that it obviously causes such transformation in people that they stop... being one of the ones who follow bourgeois authority, which is obviously what happened to Timothy Leary, is quite fascinating. And I sometimes wonder if that's how it goes for me too. Okay. I was convinced that the choice was to be independent, effective, right, or obedient, routine, good, but not both. The high school principal looked at me calmly. You have consistently ignored the principles upon which the school is based. The Kantian categorical imperative. No one has a right to do that which, if everyone did, would destroy society. I was the editor of the high school paper which had just won the interstate prize for excellence, but I cut classes and skipped school. The principal slowly turned a fountain pen in his hand. There was a month until graduation. He was thinking about the administrative trouble involving in expelling me. He was getting close to retirement, a wise old New Englander. He put the pen down. His eyes were on his blotter. He wouldn't look at me. I never wanted to see you or talk to you again. Just stay away from me and my office. Damn, so even Timothy Leary was getting in trouble with the school and challenging authority at that point. Interesting. No cadet was allowed to sit next to me in the West Point mess hall, and I was required to request food by writing on a pad, which I never did. The cadet adjutant had climbed up the observation shelf from where he bellowed out his cry of, "Attention!" The clatter of dishes and babble of conversation ceased. 2,000 grey coat cadets sat silently. Headquarters, United States Military Academy, West Point, New York, August 18, 1941, in the case of... No way. Are you telling me that fucking Timothy Leary was at West Point? Hold on. I want to check this. This is fucking wild, man. If that's true. So what time is that on? 4:30. If Timothy Leary's from fucking West Point... Oh, wait, did Timothy Leary go to West Point? He enrolled at West Point. In his first few months, he received numerous demerits for Leary was invited to attend in January. Was Timothy. He received... I'm going to go to the West Point thing. Because that is so interesting. He received numerous demerit for rules infractions and then got into serious trouble for failing to report rule breaking by cadets he supervised. He was also accused of going on a drinking binge and failing to admit it, and was asked by the honor committee to resign. He refused and was shunned by fellow cadets. He was acquitted by a court-martial by the silencing continued. That's fucking wild to think that Timothy Leary was at fucking West Point. That is... Dude, what the hell? There you have it, folks. He went to West Point. 2,000 Grey Coat cadets sat silently. Headquarters, United States Military Academy, West Point, New York, August 18, 1941. In the case of Cadet Timothy Leary, second class, the Honor Committee of the Cadet Corps agrees to accept the verdict of the court-martial not guilty at ease. The silence hung over the huge hall, larger than 3 football fields, and then hushed conversations began. That afternoon, I packed my gear in a Jeep and drove to the railroad staff station down in by the Hudson under the Granite Fortress Cliffs. First-classmen who knew and sympathized, and some plebs who didn't know but sympathized came up to shake my hand. Most of them, by habit, still maintained the silence. And a colonel attached to the superintendent's office stopped, flagged the Jeep down, and came over silently and shook my hand. Took a moment for the Jesuit dean of students to understand my refusal of his offer to return to Holy Cross. Then his face flushed with red. I'd never seen him angry before. He was jolly, cocky, friend of the students' professor, and wore his hard, square black hat jauntily over his left eye. He turned quickly, black robe swirling, and stomped off. Social systems larger than the clan are based on irrational and unnecessary fear, and that's why they can't tolerate detached action no matter how effective. There you go, people. For large systems, there has to be incredibly fucking absurd and stupid rules to make sure that you don't get to like even the more simple stuff. Or more complex stuff in the first place. At the time I ate the sacred mushrooms in Mexico, I was a rational humanist, supremely confident but empty because although I could predict and master the game, I had lost the thread of mystery. I had run through and beyond the middle-class professional game board. There were no surprise moves left. I died even to the lure of ambition, power, sex. It was all a monopoly game. Easy to win, but meaningless. I'd just been promised tenure at Harvard. 5 hours after eating the mushrooms, it all changed. The revelation had come. The veil had been pulled out. The classic vision, the full-blown conversion experience, the prophetic call, the works God had spoken. But Peter, standing up with the 11, lifted up his voice and said unto them, Hearken to my words, for this is that which was spoken by the prophet Joel. And it shall come to pass in the last days, saith God, I will pour out my spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and your daughters shall prophesy, and your young men shall see visions, and your old men shall dream dreams. Damn. When you can take phrases from the Bible like that, where it's basically saying everyone shall be prophets, everyone shall see visions, everyone shall be able to philosophize, that kind of thing. That's what evolution of consciousness looks like, people. Anyway. It was for me, the authentic Moses, Muhammad, Blake, Bohem, Shankara, St. John of the Cross trip. Now, mind you, I'm not comparing myself to these great, eloquent, effective, popular newscasters for the Central Broadcasting Station. Millions of unknown, incoherent, ineffective persons have stumbled on the billion-year-old ticker tape and got the message and have been unable to tune it back to society. But believe this, the message is the same in spite of the transmitter, and I got to message by a swimming pool in Konakava in August 1960. Then what? If I had been a believing psychologist, the temptation would be to rush back to the tribe and use the revelation in the psychology game get research grants, write scientific articles, become famous, a new food, so simple, and so what? If I had been a painter, I would have started etching out the visions and gained renown and money as a new Salvador Dali. If I had been a businessman, the reflex reaction to the mushroom vision would be commercial. Business is the religion of America, and the best way to have introduced psychedelic sacraments into the culture would have been to market them. I recalled the first businessman that we ever turned on. He was a friend of a psychiatrist who brought him over on one Sunday for a session. After a couple of hours, he swam up to me with that ecstatic, all-seeing gleam in his eye. Magnificent! I see it all. Incredible. Look, Leary, you've got to get me 1 million doses of this. I smiled. This was the usual reaction. The physicist wanted 1 million doses to solve the non-existent problem of space-time. The artist to make the world beautiful. What would you do with 1 million doses? Ooh. The merchant looked at me with disdain. Why? It's obvious. This is worth $100 a dose. 1 million doses is $100 million bucks. If it weren't for my scholar's prejudice against commerce, we might have added small amounts of psilocybin to ginger ale and quinine water bottles and sold it as a new form of cocktail. 1 bottle would have been the equivalent of a joint of marijuana. 10 bottles would produce a visionary voyage. Psilocybin at that time was considered a mild, safe form of mushroom juice. And who would have objected to its sale in health stores? What would be more American than non-alcoholic ecstasy cocktails sold for a profit? The most typical thing to do after your revelation is to announce it to everyone. Rush back and tell everyone. Listen, wake up. You are God. You have the divine plan engraved in cellular script within you. Listen, take this sacrament. You'll see. You'll get the revelation. It'll change your life. You will be reborn. Started doing this the day after my conversion. I rushed over to Tepoztlan to tell the McClellan's. Mary McClellan is a Quaker mystic, and she listened with interest and sympathy. David McClellan is a Presbyterian convert to Quakerism. His shock and horror was unmistakable. If I described his pleasure of heroin or sexual seduction of minors, he couldn't have shown more reflex dismay. I found myself getting poetic and dogmatic. I know it is a real divinity. I know it is the divine message. David McClellan now looked alarmed. Clinical diagnosis, Gnostic glances. Wow, do I have a nut on my hands here? He was my boss at Harvard. I shut up and made a joke about Celtic enthusiasm, and we talked about department politics. I was faced with the ancient dilemma of the visionary to whom God had spoken. After his illumination, the Buddha sat for 49 days and nights. Interesting numerological thing, because 49 is the day, like the amount for Babylon. I didn't think I'd come across that, actually. So just so you know, like 49 is like the number of Babylon, and it's kind of significant with like 7 by 7. It's also like a significant number in the Enochian sort of divination system with like the 49 angels and things like that. Number 49 appears a lot in my life. Way too much. After his illumination, the Buddha sat for 40 days and nights, wondering if he should go back and tune in the message. He knew the Hindu priesthood would be angry. Muhammad got into all sorts of administrative trouble. After 3 years, only 13 persons, slaves, no accounts, and women listened to him. Bahim, Eckhart, and Luther and George Fox spoke about it, and the wrath of the establishment came down on them. Even Moses had his problems. When are you ready to take the message seriously enough to announce it? This is it. Thou art the man. I am he. You are he. Don't be deceived by the bureaucratic church. Don't think you can escape it. The revelation comes to every man in his lifetime. You can close your eyes and try to ignore it, but it will come to you. Every man is the chosen man. Have you forgotten? But when are you ready to accept it? And how will you announce it? For an American 1960 AD, there was little vocational preparation for the prophetic role. There was no college major for prophecy, least of all in the divinity schools. So the steps of secular success were spelled out in every college catalog, but not for that only important profession, the discovery of your divinity. There was no listening in the yellow pages of the phone book for visionary Messiah. The entire weight of American education is engineered to crush the religious impulse. Other times have been easier. Luther was a brilliant priest in a God-obsessed society. The Buddha had pursued a grueling yoga for several years before his flash. I was unprepared for the message. It would take me 6 years to accept the call. I was trained as a psychologist. Psychology is a particularly vulgar, profane profession. It took Carl Jung a lifetime to kick the psychology habit and locate his center within. T.G. Fechner, the founder of scientific psychology, lay tormented on a bed, blind, incoherent for more than a year before he tore off the blindfold and spoke the word. All is consciousness, and consciousness is one. I did not want to barefoot forth from Mexico preaching the word. I flew back to Harvard University and started a research project. The strategy was to provide religious experience and then scientifically measure the over benefit. Make them feel right and they'll do right. Make them feel good and they'll do good. I didn't mention the religious revelation part, just the public good, the behavior change that would result. The dull would become creative, the neurotic would become whole, the criminal would reform his evil ways. Through questionnaire and objective personality tests and statistical analysis, we would prove scientifically that God exists in man and that this power miracles doth perform. Of course, everyone intuitively saw through the scheme and resisted it. Everyone, that is, who didn't turn on. Damn. The self-appointed scientists and the academics were skeptical and irritated. They sensed what I was up to and knew that my charisma and enthusiasm could make it work. The psychedelic sages also murmured against the research plan. It was too public, too superficial, too easy. The psychedelic underground, the handful of Americans who knew where it was at, most of them long-time students of Oriental philosophy and mystical experiences. The first friend to warn me to keep the discovery private was Frank Barron. He was shocked at my organizing a large project of graduate students. This sort of research is internal. Take it yourself and read Blake. Frank had taken the mushrooms 2 years before, and it plunged him into 12 months of contemplation, wild poetry, and dedicated study of mystical philosophy. The politics, the administration, the organization of a large research project made no sense to him. Frank Barron is a gentleman scholar of the old school, a cross between William James and Dylan Thomas. Bureaucracy, committee meetings alienated his Celtic mystic intuitions. Experimentation on the sacred mushroom and the mystic experience made no more sense to Frank than the psychological studies of the effects of the Catholic sacraments. What are the mental health implications of baptism? Let us request the Federal Foundation grant to administer personality tests before and after Holy Communion. What are the psychiatric diagnostic characteristics of the visionary prophet? Let us make quantitative measurements and statistical analyses of the Holy Spirit. Oh, really? Are you kidding? Damn. Listen, Frank. Let's come on as psychologists and develop a research project that aims at producing the ecstatic moment. Develop a science of ecstatics. Train graduate students to illuminate themselves and others. We have statisticians who systemize the static. How about statisticians who systemize the ecstatic? No, you can't do it with graduate students. They are temperamentally and professionally trained to look outside at behavior. You'll find your native mystics among artists, poets, eccentrics. Don't mix the professional with the spiritual. And don't talk about mushrooms as such. That was sort of interesting because I was just thinking about this recently because I'm at university, right? And I have sometimes wondered if I should try and keep this stuff separate, and maybe it's true. I can still try and push books, but maybe I shouldn't push the matter inside a university. You know? I mean, people are pretty apathetic, and I don't think people are going to really care. So, yeah. Let's go. No, you can't do it with graduate students. Okay, wait. And don't talk about the mushrooms so much. But it was impossible not to talk about the experience. I was peripherally involved in Cambridge social life, cocktails, dinners, conversations, sitting on a sofa with a dry martini trying to explain what it is like to go out of your mind and talk to God. Professors' wives leaning forward, wet lips, eyes glistening, the scent of perfume and alcohol breath, fascination, disbelief, fear. Gerald Hurd, bearded, wide old philosopher, knew what was going to happen. He had studied the sociology of ecstasy for 40 years and recognized the ancient sacramental meaning of LSD. He came to visit us at Harvard. We asked his advice in the form of specific practical questions, and he always replied in parables. The Eleusinian mysteries, tantric cults, Tibetan secrets, the Masonic Brotherhood, the Illuminati, medieval sects, the oral tradition, the secret teachings always passed from guru to disciple. He never gave an explicit answer, but the meaning was clear. He who speaks does not know. He who knows speaks privately or not at all. Go underground. Damn. That was... Wow. You know, that's sort of like a bit of an axe to the face in a certain sense. Speak privately or not at all. So, I get it's ironic because I'm on a public platform, right? But people who are finding my content are looking for me. So it's not really that bad that I'm sort of speaking out on a public platform like this. But maybe in different places, different contexts, right place, right time will help us rise above all the dirt and grime. Maybe this is where it's much more important. So that's where it probably comes in. You got to be careful where you talk about this stuff. Anyway, let's continue. Alan Watts came to visit. Wise, detached, funny, jolly, bubbling, eloquent, experienced. He was shy of groups and organizations. Don't upset the establishment. Blavatsky's secret, the English occultist, Gurdjieff and Alsperansky, the fourth way of the sly man. He does not profess a public yoga. He takes his little pill and goes all the way. Don't profess publicly. Okay. Interesting. This is coming to be a very interesting trip for me, fellas. Honestly. Because I didn't think I would see a lot of that stuff. Alan, a former Anglican priest, conducted our first LSD session on Easter Sunday, a high church ceremony. Goblets, homemade bread, and good French wine. Parables and Zen jokes. Susan, my 12-year-old, and Jack, age 10, performed as acolytes. The sun shone through the clouds at noon, and Madison Presnell and Lisa, his beautiful flower wife, and their twins arrived from church radiant in Easter clothes. Lisa played the grand piano, and Madison, with his African seed wisdom, played the grand jester and floated up to us on contact high and spun out psychedelic stories. At the communion supper, Alan laughed. I see everything in its cosmic dimension, every phrase, every action. How divinely funny. Aldous Huxley sat with us in our early planning sessions and turned on with us, but remained convinced that religion was the inevitable institutional channel for the psychedelics. He called LSD a gratuitous grace. At his suggestion, I initiated discussions with some Unitarian ministers. They were, as always, cultured, tolerant, open-minded, but hopelessly intellectual. One day in December 1960, I received a note from a Professor Huston Smith, philosopher at MIT. We lunched at the faculty club. It seemed that during a seminar on religious experiences at MIT, Professor Smith had suggested that Westerners could never hope to attain the mystic experience. Aldous had passed over a note to Huston Smith with my telephone number. Professor Smith had an ideal background from a psychedelic trip. His parents were missionaries and he spent 17 years in China. His professional game was comparative religion. He had sought the visionary experience in monasteries in Burma and Japan. He had been waiting and working for a long time for the direct confrontation, and so always arranged that on New Year's Day, 1961. Huston and his good wife, Eleanor, would come to my house to turn on. They arrived late and Huston was nervous. There was no ritual because I was too inexperienced to understand the importance of ritual and too ignorant to suggest that Huston and Eleanor provide their own and too aware of the trap of mind to impose my structure on the experience. After taking the sacrament, Huston lay for 6 hours in a comatose terror. Then lay for 4 hours in silent dazed contemplation. I've been busy during the day offering irrelevant aid, tea, not drunk, fruit, not eaten, supportive remarks unanswered. As I drove them home in heavy silence, I felt the session was a failure, half blaming my inexperience, half blaming the subjects for being unprepared. The next day, Huston phoned with the most enthusiastic, ecstatic, grateful cordiality. This session was more than he expected. The sacrament had unlocked the door. In the subsequent months, Huston ran psilocybin sessions for undergraduate and graduate students at MIT laboratory exercises for his lecture on the mystic experience. Those were the casual days before the politicians and the dark priesthood of psychiatry had made a scandal out of LSD. After the session, some of his students roared over to Harvard to dedicate their lives to the psychedelic cause, but we had no way of using these unleashed spiritual energies. No turn on, tune in, drop out program. We had our hands full with converted Harvard students. I wonder what ever happened to those eager youngsters. During the summer and the fall of 1961, more and more interest in psychedelics was developing, particularly among the religious. Dr. Walter Houston Clark, Dean of the Hartford Seminary, was a visiting scholar at Harvard and kept coming around to talk about turning on. He was a handsome, distinguished, graying figure of somewhat awesome respectability. He neither drank nor smoked and talked about William James. I felt he was really too academic and conservative to flip out in the divine dance. I had a protective feeling about him. He couldn't really know what was involved. Then there was Walter Fank, a young country bumpkin, fresh-faced, gee-whiz enthusiast. He had a ministerial degree, Midwest Lutheran, I believe, and a medical license. It was an advanced graduate student in the PhD program of Harvard Divinity School. Since when was there something called Harvard Divinity School? That's wild. Harvard Divinity School. Was that? I can't believe that's actually a thing. Damn. Walter wanted to do these dissertation research on the psychedelic experience. Yes, sir. A medically supervised, double-blind, pre- and post-tested, controlled, scientifically up-to-date, kosher experiment on the production of the objectively defined, bona fide mystic experience as described by Christian visionaries and to be brought about by our administrations. Walter Pank was so serious and so naive, I laughed out loud. How many subjects, Walter? Well, 20 in the control group and 20 in the experiment. And they all take the drug in a church with organ music and a sermon and the whole precedent ritual going. I've read all you need written about the importance of set and setting, and it sounds right to me. Walter Pank spoke with a Boy Scout sincerity. I gulped. You mean you are suggesting we turn on 20 people at the same time in the same public place? Yes, sirree. Wouldn't it be scientific to do it at different times? Besides, I want to do it on a Good Friday in the Boston University Chapel. I know Dean Howard Thurmond, and he is interested in the mystic experience, and he'll let us use the chapel. I really had to laugh at the caricature of the experimental design applied to that most sacred experience. If he had proposed giving aphrodisiacs to 20 virgins to produce a mass orgasm, it would have sounded further out. Oh, good to know that he's got a good sense of humor. My dear Walter, I'm speechless. That is the most reckless, wild suggestion I've ever heard in my life. You don't understand what you're dealing with. A psychedelic experience flips you out of your mind. It's intimate. It's private. You laugh. You moan in cosmic terror. You roll on the floor wrestling with God and the devil. In particular, the first session must be a protected, quiet, secure surrounding Malta Pank or stubborn. It'll be secure, all right? I've got a medical degree and I have tranquilizers to inject. And I'll do psychiatric interviews to screen out pre-psychotics. No, Walter, you don't get the point. What you are proposing may be psychiatrically safe, but it's indecent. You'll never have a session. Have you? Nope. Well, Walter, I like your idea. I love to help you do a systematic study of the mystic experience, but you must know what is involved. You must have several sessions yourself before you begin to think about a research study. Nope, he couldn't do that. He realized that there might be all sorts of opposition to his study from Harvard, from the divinity school, from the medical people. Gosh. He knew how hidebound people were. Therefore, he must preserve his psychedelic virginity. He didn't want to be accused of being biased and too positive. He had to be able to say that he had never taken the drug until after his thesis was accepted. The more time I spent with the indefatigable Walter Pank, the more impressed I became. Behind his cornball facade, there was an inner dedication, an unruffled optimism, a deep belief in the religious experience and the power of psychedelics to produce it. An informal religious seminar slowly emerged. We began meeting on Sunday nights at Huston Smith's house. Walter Clark and Walter Pank and dignified professors from the Divinity School and visiting preachers and divines and a group of graduate students from the Divinity School. I would preach and answer questions. Huston and Walter Clark and Walter Pank would comment and encourage. Gradually, an experiment developed. We would run a session for several divinity students. This was a trial run by, for Walter Pank, a preparation for his big experiment. The session was scheduled for a Saturday morning in March 1962. We met in two groups, one at my house and one at Huston's house. We had built up a staff of session guides, Harvard graduate students, and young professors. It went well. Walter Clark finally had his mystic experience, which he described in a moving report. Interesting. A psychedelic experience posed problems for some of the divinity students. Each one of these voyagers had a vision as dramatic as Moses or Muhammad. One college chaplain found himself in a bottomless well of a cell and tissue and realized he was dying, i.e. mortal. And looked up for the light but doubted and reached for faith and prayer and couldn't find it. And despaired and fell back on his mind for explanations and control. And grew sulky and demanding and could not believe. He explained the experience afterward in psychiatric terms and soon after left the ministry for a career in the social sciences. It was strong, Old Testament stuff. Believe me. Another minister found himself dying and cried out in fear. And we told him, pray, brother. And he had prayed and he was reborn in radiance. And another rolled on the floor, discovering that sex was the red flame of life, copulating the carpet and cried out, is God nothing but sex? And we reminded him of his prayer, thy will be done, Lord, not my will but thine. And he prayed and wept for joy. And another minister walked tensely into the garden, and when I approached him smiling, he said, if you mention the word guilt to me, I'll punch you in the nose. Oh, jeez. That's wild. And he cried out in despair, who can help me? I said, pray to your God. And he said, the hell with God. I want my wife. And I said, your wife is God. And he said, right, my wife is God. Get me home. Toward the end of the session, we got a driver to take him 100 miles back to his wife. And he had 2 telepathic experiences that left him awed and reverent and very much in love with his wife. No. And the minister who fell on his knees ordered us all to do likewise and looked up at me with righteous tears and said, Timothy Leary, put aside your vanity and testify to the blood of the Lamb. And his minister friend, also high, said, yes, amen. Look at his minister friend. Look at his eyes, the eyes of Christ. And I looked down at the wells of suffering and groaned that laughing. Jesus had been made martyr by these Christians. And the friend said, ho, ho. The great Leary, master of games, had met his match in the eyes of Jesus. Look at these. They see through even your game, Dr. Leary. And I wouldn't kneel. I said, let us pray together. But the suffering eyes flashed with righteousness, and I felt the arms go around my knees. By God, I was tackled by suffering Jesus' eyes, burning me with reproach. And the 2 Christians on their knees looked up at me relentless, and lined back at Jesus' eyes would not let me go. I was amused and irritated because I saw the 2,000 years of Christian moral one-upsmanship and missionary coercion and holy sadomasochism. If I moved, I'd be brought down in a tackle. Damn. Unless I move violently, in which case I'd hurt the suffering Jesus' eyes. I won't let you go, brother Leary, until you fall on your knees for Jesus, and you will do it if I have to hold you for days. Jesus' eyes wouldn't let go and wouldn't stop talking and wailing about blood of the Lamb. Repent. So I said, I'll stay here praying silently my Buddha prayer as long as you insist on holding me slave to you. Onward, Christian soldiers, but for Christ's sake, shut up and let us meditate and worship in holy silence. And his friend said, yes, let's meditate silently with Brother Tim. But Jesus' eyes couldn't keep still and he kept screaming. He died for our sins. And I fought down by desire to straight arm the linebacker and run for the goal, and I relaxed, and after 5 minutes, Jesus' eyes let go his tackle for a split second. And I was off and away to the kitchen where I opened the refrigerator and pulled out a beer and was sitting with my feet on the kitchen table when the missionaries roared and to save my soul, and when the preaching continued, I opened the window and sorry, I lost my place, guys. Fuck's sake. When the missionaries roared in to save my soul, and when the preaching continued, I opened the window and the soft spring air billowed the curtain, and I shouted, see, that soft breeze? That's the breath of God for me. And hear these birds? We all listened. Well, that's the sermon I tune into. It's all God, beloved Jesus' eyes, and the bubbles on this beer. See them? They're part of the divine scheme too. I toast you and God. And with that, we all smiled, and the session went on. It was during these sessions that I first caught on the power and the meaning of prayer. The prayer wasn't a telegram sent in the English language to the Department of Requisition and supply on the top floor. Oh, dear. I realized that you had to be out of your mind to pray, that you can't rationalize with a 5 billion-year-old energy process, that only psychotics and flipped-out saints and psychedelics can pray, and that prayer is the compass, the gyroscope, the centering device to give you direction and courage and trust at those moments when you are overwhelmed by the power and breadth of divine process. The psychedelic experience posed problems for some of the divinity students. It seemed that most of them were interested in their doctorates and academic careers. The problem is that in these careers, the revelatory confrontation and the voice of God had not played much of a part. So there were crises of conscience and identity, but it was all healthy and yeasty, and the religious seminar continued Sunday evenings, and we kept turning on ministers and divinity students by day and by night. Meanwhile, I had been through my big LSD death rebirth under the guidance of Michael, and the religious ontological nature of the psychedelic experience was obvious to me, and any secular discussion about psychedelic drugs, creativity, psychiatric treatment, etc. seemed irrelevant. I was catching the religious fever. Now, when we're talking about religious fever, we're really talking about like the spiritual fever, not the one where you throw your arms in the air and say hallelujah, hallelujah, or Allah Akbar. Okay, it's more like that strong feeling of religious experience and joy that comes from like the whole experience of God. And that's what it means to have religious fever and intoxication, Dionysian intoxication, as a way of thinking about it. All right. An increasing number of priests and ministers and theologians kept coming around, and then in the spring of 1962 came the swing to the east. It started with Fred Swain, World War II Air Force Major, who became a Vedanta Hindu monk in 1948, and who lived in an ashram near Boston. He started hanging out at the house, and he told us about Hinduism and the psychedelic pantheon of gods and his guru and yoga. Fred had gone to Mexico the year before and had sorry. Fuck's sake. Fred, fuck's sake. This is not good. I lost my place. Had gone to Mexico the year before. I had a far-out mushroom trip with Maria Sabrina in the mountains of Oaxaca. I started visiting the Vedanta ashram. It was a surprise and delight to discover this group of holy, mature, sensible people who had renounced the world in pursuit of the visionary quest. The Hindu Bibles read like psychedelic manuals. The Hindu myths were session reports. The ashram itself was a turn-on, a serene, rhythmic life of work and meditation, all aimed at getting high. The reports of Fred Swain and Alan Watts and Aldous Huxley had impressed them with the yogic possibilities of psychedelic drugs. They were watching me too, testing me out. After several visits, I was asked shyly to guide a session for some of the people in the ashram. I came to the ashram early one morning and joined with meditating, chanting service. Then those who would take the trip remained for more prayers and contemplation. The LSD had been placed in chalices on the altar. Incense and flowers adorned it. The LSD sacrament was mixed with holy water from the Ganges, blessed and drunk. That's probably the first time I've sort of heard LSD sort of been sacralized and made sort of holy in that way. I mean, in a religious sort of way. Because usually it's like, and then off you go. But I guess all of it's holy, so I think that's probably a good thing. In human affairs, aesthetics come into being when tradition exists that, strong and abiding like mountains, are made pleasing by a lucid beauty. By contemplating the forms existing in the heavens, we come to understand time and its changing demands. Through contemplation of forms existing in human society, it becomes possible to shape the world. I should probably read the I Ching a bit more because it seems like even though it seems like it's philosophical first and divination second, which I find kind of interesting. Then we moved from the altar to the larger shrine room. We sat Indian style on an oriental rug, candles, incense, chanting. Then the holy folk got high. I could see the LSD take over. In spite of their years of preparation, they were shocked by the power and complexity of the LSD. They knew exactly what was happening, but it still scared them. I was high too and overcome by the power of the ashram and the shrine and the ancient rituals. We were all caught in Hindu mythologies. I was awed and dazzled and confused. What happens here? Now I'm Siva. Okay, but what do I do? Hindu sessions have been going on for 5,000 years. I'm a naive Westerner. I remember my prayer. When in doubt, be quiet, drift, trust. I sat erect in the Indian position, flipped out, ecstatic, bewildered. The holy people of the ashram were bowled over. They really saw the mythic nature of the situation. They looked up at me in terror and awe. I was radiating energy. The beautiful Nung Sakti gasped and crawled over and put her head in my lap. Damn, so Leary had become Shiva in this because Sakti is like another one of Shiva's consorts. O Bhagavan Lord, you have conquered me. Forgive my doubts and my arrogance. I surrender to you. The other watched with hushed attention. Fred Swain, crouched, squatting, the monkey god. Hanuman. We were four figures from a temple carving. We were four timeless divinities caught in the classic posture of union, celebration, cosmic tension. I leaned down and smiled and stroked Saksi's brow. Rest, beloved, we are one. She sighed, oh yes, and the others nodded. The candles burned silently. The incense smoke rose. Essence of holy India. Reek of Kaligat temple. Calcutta. Holy scent of Ram, Madir, Benares, and Jagannath, Puri, and Konarak. I looked around the room. Ramakrishna's statue breathed and his eyes twinkled the message. Vivekananda's brown face beamed and winked. Christ grinned to be joined again with his celestial brothers. The rare wood walls breathed. The sacred Kundalini serpent uncoiled up the bronze candelabra to the 1,000-petaled lotus blossom. This was the fulcrum moment of eternity, the exact second of consciousness, fragile, omniscient. God was present and spoke to us in silence. That is probably one of the more poignant ones because, like, silence is actually how you sort of get messages. And silence is a form of stability because if you consider like the four powers of the Sphinx, for example, what you're thinking about. So, like, to know is attributed to Aquarius, air of air, to will, air of fire, Leo, to dare, air of water, Scorpio, and to air of earth, Taurus, to be silent. Because messages do come in silence and not from speaking. Usually that's how they always come. So God was present and spoke to us in silence. That's why in meditation is important, people. All right, let's continue. I was overcome with reverence and gratitude to be allowed this glimpse, this participation in the holy company in the venerable dance. I was a Hindu from the moment on. No, that's not the way to say it. I recognize the day in the temple that we are all Hindus in our essence. We are all Hindu gods and goddesses. Laughing Krishna, immutable Brahman, yes, and Asiatic sensual Siva. Stern Kali with bloody hands, undulant flowering Lakshmi, multi-armed Vishnu, noble Rama. That day in the temple, I discovered my Hinduness. Things were different after that session. There was a new dimension. I was less a confident American and more an unsure human. Yeah, that happens, man, when you drop out, take control, that kind of thing. There's more mystery and more sense of being part of an ancient processional profession. The slow, invisible process of becoming a guru, a holy man, had begun. It'd be 4 years before I could openly admit to it, accept my divinity, my divine election. This holy man thing is always something you confess to rather than claim. That's a really good message, actually, because that happens to a lot of people, I reckon, including me. Because I've sort of been wrestling with that when my own personal synchronicities in my own life. I'm not going to talk about them because I don't really want to sound boastful or arrogant. But yeah, it's more about confessing your role as someone powerful and a messenger and all this other kind of thing. So yeah, this holy man thing is always something you confess to rather than claim. When you say it, you lose it, but not for long. It's a relentless growing process which, like aging or wrinkles, once it has begun, can't be stopped. The inexorable, unplanned for, troublesome, comically embarrassing, implausible, unstoppable tidal sweep towards sainthood. How ironic and ludicrous that an American Irishman should be forced into sainthood. There was the dim recognition that I had known it all since childhood. In the flush of youthful game success, the nagging, peripheral, elusive memory that I had been through this before, that no game victory or career achievement could satisfy because I had won and the lost the same game so many times before. Is this reincarnation? Or just the living out of adolescent fantasies of messiahism? It makes no difference how you explain it. It's as real as rain. The first intimations of the prophetic role came after the session in the ashram. The monks and nuns treated me as a guru. To them, it was obvious. I was not a Harvard psychologist with a staff of research assistants. Come off it, please. I was, like it or not, playing out the ancient role. Wow. The evolution of organic forms is a combination of internal protein potentially and external pressure, seed and sun, and so with man's spiritual evolution, inner potential plus external social pressure. When the guru was always members of ashram would visit me for religious advice, and wandering aspirants began to drift into the house, devotees looking for cosmic direction, not game counsel. Their dilemmas are celestial, not practical. And you don't offer solutions, just reminders of who we are and where we came from and how it is to unfold. We all know these things, we just need reminders. The person who remembers, who reminds, who acts as an alarm clock, who becomes time and weather announcer for Central Broadcasting, station RDNA, this person is called Guru, Prophet. Fuck. How incredible is that, man? You motherfucker! Oh my God, I lost connection. Oh my God. But he dare not decide controversial issues in this way. Hold on, Leo. I just want to see where I am, guys. Sorry, because fucking disconnected. I'm actually so mad about that. Hold on. Water, Scorpio, and air of. And with that, we all smiled, and the session went on. At the time, I ate the sacred mushrooms of Mexico. Implausible, unstoppable, tidal sweep towards sainthood. How ironic and ludicrous that an American and you don't seed and sun, and so with man's spiritual evolution, inner potential plus external social pressure. When the guru was always members of ashram would visit me for religious advice, and wandering aspirants began to drift into the house, devotees looking for cosmic direction, not game counsel. Their dilemmas are celestial, not practical. And you don't offer solutions, just reminders of a way. Okay, hopefully I didn't lose any of that, guys. Yeah, I actually might get a new modem or something like that, because it keeps having the tendency to drop out, and that makes me mad. I hope you got all that, because that was fucking incredible. I will actually say it one more time. When the guru was away, members of the ashram would visit for religious advice, and wandering devotees began to drift in the same house. Their dilemmas are, yeah. So I did. It did actually. Okay, good. I did record it. Sorry about that. So sorry. Okay. Thankfully, it's still there. The profession of holy man is based, like everything else human, upon the laws of the nervous system and the laws of social interaction. It involves feedback, set expectations, setting, social pressure, habit. If you are turned on, tuned in, dropped out, then people will begin treating you as a spiritual teacher. And if people continue to press you with questions and problems and emotions appropriate only to the guru role, you begin to act like a holy man. You just have to. But the acting like a holy man spiritual teacher must always be in touch with your holy inner experimenting. If the holy actions get separated from the holy orgiastic ecstasy revelation thread inside, then you become a fraud. A play actor priest, a pious do-gooder. That's the occupational hazard of a messiah. You have to keep turning on, tuning in, dropping out yourself. You have to have a frightening sacrament that works and continues to work. Oh my God. For me personally, guys, that's actually one of the most really fucking important things now, because that just made me realize something. You need to continue doing it. I know why I have it now. It would be to talk with yours truly, Harley Donnelly or Illuminostic, about this kind of thing. Because he's the one who sort of got me into it. But now, like so many things, oh my God, people, just came into focus, and now a lot makes sense. Now we'll continue with the thing, because this has been one of the most fucking powerful trips, man. I'm in love with this one. This is probably gonna be one of my favorite ones. Man. The fire whose light illuminates the mountain, makes it pleasing, does not shine far. In the same way, beautiful forms suffice to brighten and throw light upon matters of lesser moment. But important questions cannot be decided in this way. They require greater earnestness. Okay. It is easier to get caught up in the guru game, and because you can keep it going in a routine fashion because your disciples are only too happy to cop out to settle for your divinity, not theirs. The guru has to keep dropping out of the guru role and shocking followers out of their piety and jarring them, and he can never stay virtuously predictable. That's why so many gurus get stable and pompous and narcissistic. I can think of plenty of those kinds of gurus and prophets or whatever. There's plenty of them around, heaps of them, and it's unfortunate. They believe and react to the power, to the fantasies about their holiness. They were the power of Gandhi, the Ramakrishna of Gurdjieff. They knew that the guru had to keep turning on, tuning in, dropping out. And that's the dilemma of Krishnamurti. He saw the falseness of his avatar god role. He had been laid on him. After all, without his choice as a child, he was too intelligent and too honest to go along with it, and he shouted, "Stop! Come on! I am not the god. You are all gods. If you only remember." But Krishnamurti had no way of turning on. None of the sacraments worked for him, and so he was caught in the reluctant guru game, lecturing and writing the message that there is no message, using his intellectual method to put down method, and teaching from 1,000 middle-class podiums that there is no teacher and there is no mystery magic, because he, Krishnamurti, like a Medici Pope, but more honest than a nepotist Renaissance Pope because he blew the whistle beautifully and cleanly on his own religious bureaucracy game, was forced into a role, and he wasn't ready for the avatar who had never turned on. Well, that spring of 1962 was rock and roll religious revival season. My house was swarming with Christian ministers and Hindu practitioners. We spent a lot of time at the Vedanta ashram, conversions and rebirths occurring on a relentless weekly schedule. LSD used as a sacrament was working. Grace has success in small matters. It is able to undertake something. Well, guys, I fucking loved that one. That was impressive. That was a religious experience in of itself. Like, I was getting ecstatic and all that other kind of thing. That's what religious fervor looks like. Okay? That's what real religious fervor looks like. When you see me get really animated and all that other kind of thing. And it can come from the word. It can come from music. It can come from sacraments. It can come from dance. It can come from everything. This was such a good trip. I'll stay here for about a minute or two to see if anyone actually does chat, because there's no concurrent viewers anymore. All right, never mind. Thank you so much for those who did tune in. Please like, comment, subscribe, come to my Substack, and I will see you guys later. I hope to do this next one. Your faith will perform miracles. Bye for now.